Hello, everybody. Welcome back to 40 Days with Dietrich, our journey through the season of Lent based on the writings of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. For today's reading, we read a small excerpt from Discipleship. The title given to this excerpt is Disobedient Belief. Bonhoeffer writes, "No one should be surprised that they cannot come to believe so long as, in deliberate disobedience, they flee or reject some aspect of Jesus' commandment. You do not want to subject some sinful passion, an enmity, a hope, your life plans, or your reason to Jesus' commandment? Then do not be surprised that you do not receive the Holy Spirit, that you cannot pray, that your prayer for faith remains empty. Instead, go and be reconciled with your sister or your brother. Let go of the sin which keeps you captive, and you will be able to believe again. If you reject God's commanding word, you will not receive God's gracious word. How do you expect to find community while you intentionally withdraw from it at some point? The disobedient cannot believe. Only the obedient believe." So this reading is really good for the opening week of Lent, because Lent is a season in which we sit with kind of those uncomfortable reflections about where in my life am I called to grow in my relationship with Jesus. Are there anything in my life, are there any habits, are there any ways of living which disrupt my faith, disrupt my connection with Jesus, that block me from entering into the full abundant life that Jesus continually wants to call me into? And that's really what Bonhoeffer is talking about throughout his language of disobedience and obedience. You get a little bit of Bonhoeffer's intensity here. Bonhoeffer, as we've said before, is ruthlessly about Jesus. For Bonhoeffer, living the Christian life is about embracing Jesus with the fullness of your life and following the call of Jesus wherever that might lead. And for Bonhoeffer, you can't make Jesus safe or palatable. Right? So you can't take the loving, the forgiving, the healing Jesus, but not take the challenging Jesus, the Jesus who confronts us, the Jesus who calls us to change. For Bonhoeffer, you can't separate them. To embrace Jesus is to embrace them both. And so he says, that place where he says, you cannot reject God's commanding word, which is the word of Jesus that commands our attention, that commands our obedience, that commands us to change our life so that it is conducive to following him. You can't accept that. You can't reject that commanding voice, that challenging voice, but expect to reside fully in that gracious voice. Because the voice of grace is also the voice of challenge. The voice of grace is also the voice of change. And so that's what Bonhoeffer is getting at. To believe is to follow, is to obey, is to listen to Jesus and work out our following of Jesus' words within the context of our lives. And here you see a little bit of the themes that begin, and hopefully you've seen just in 5 days, the themes that often run throughout his work. So he talks about community. And he talks about you can't expect to reside in full Christian community if you reject it, if you continually walk away from it. In other places, he will talk about if you reject the Christian brother or sister because they are not what you want them to be, how will you ever be able to reside in Christian community? And here you kind of get that hint here. And so in a very Lenten way, he calls us to think about our lives, think about Are there sins that we need to confess and we need to move away from? Are there reconciliations with brothers or sisters that we need to work out? Where does Jesus call us in obedience to him? And that can be challenging. And yet that is the journey of Lent. And for Bonhoeffer, that is the journey of discipleship. God bless you as you walk through your journey of Lent, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.